Thanks, Steph. So yeah, as a quick intro about myself, my name is Aline Tomasian, and I'm an engineer by training, but I am founding a startup for the very first time. So like many of you in the audience, I have a lot of questions, and I realize that having good mentors and advisors is invaluable. So I'm very excited to hear what the panelists have to say. So let's go around and do brief intros from the panel. Laura, do you want to take the lead?
Yes, thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Hi, I'm Laura Teicher. I'm the president and executive director of Forge. We're a nonprofit that helps hard tech companies with their product development, manufacturing, and supply chains. I'm excited for this conversation today.
Kat, you want to go next?
Yes, hi, thank you. I'm Kat, from Mongolia originally, studied math at UVA, and then just a quick background. After building enterprise SaaS products at Accenture, I during my MBA at MIT tried to work on a mental health chatbot startup unsuccessfully, and then joined a Boston-based firm called InnoSpark Ventures, investing in early stage AI and impact companies. And now I am advising startups and as well as working on some of my creative skills through a variety of projects, one of which is a science fiction movie about AI. So I would not have had this adventure without wonderful mentors along the way. So I'm excited to talk about that today.
Very cool. Thanks, Kat. Anuj, you want to
Yeah,
go next?
Anuj, currently an expert in residence at Techstars, and I've been a mentor at Techstars for many years. So get to work with a lot of founders, have been a mentor, have been an advisor, have been a consultant. I do all of these things. And the biggest reason I'm here is because I actually have degrees in chemistry and biochemistry, and I now have a career in growth, which should not happen at all. Only reason that's happened is because of some very generous people that opened up their doors and gave me some time. Right, so excited to dig into stuff like that.
Very cool. Yeah, I think it's always nice to hear from someone who doesn't have, a predefined path as well. So as you can see, we have a very experienced panel, and excited to jump into the questions. So it looks like this was asked in the chat already, but for the purpose of this discussion, I'm considering an advisor to be someone that actually takes equity in your company, whereas a mentor, I'm considering that someone who doesn't. So I don't think that there's a universal agreement between these two terms, but just for the purpose of this discussion. Otherwise, I'm sure there's a lot of overlap. So the first question I have is, how do you know which one you need, mentor versus advisor? Kat, I'll pass this one to you.
Yeah. Yeah, as you said, mentors are more kind of there to informally help you, who are invested in you as a person. And, you should always be kind of building and maintaining a network of them. And advisors are more formalized help, more for your venture specifically, I would say. I think advisors usually start out as mentors first, unless you or your investors feel like you need an official advisory board for your venture, whether scientific or business, and initiates a process for that. And I mean, even in that case, I think you would still have a phase of mentorship with that person to see if there's alignment. And then, if they can and want to help more hands-on, whether technically, strategically, or with network, then you kind of discuss the compensation, whether cash or equity, and usually earlier stage side, you don't have a lot of cash, so you set up an equity that could range anywhere from 0.1% to 1.5%, depending on stage and level of involvement.
Yeah, nice. That makes a lot of sense to start it out as a mentorship relationship and see if you're a good match. So is there typically an understanding or an agreement on how much time they spend on your startup? Anuj, you want to take this one?
Yes and no. So I think going off of what Kat said, like especially with an advisor who's going to be there for more strategic guidance, more business specific guidance, always a good idea to have like an agreement set up upfront. In fact, the one I use and ask people to use, there's one by Founder Institute. They've got a really simple template that lays out hey, this much equity for this level of involvement. You can adapt a similar thing for mentors as well. Always a good idea. Get that upfront alignment because it will depend on people's availability, especially if it's a more informal agreement with mentors. And the other thing with mentors is, they, to me at least, they're almost like quasi therapists in a way, because they're not just there for business guidance, right? I mean, I think I pick a mentor, or I ask people to pick a mentor because they've sort of experienced what you've experienced as well. So they're more than just for business guidance, and they're for your personal growth as well. And so there is, some level of excitement there as well to help somebody along and
Right,
avoid
right.
the traps they've fallen into as well. So generally I found it doesn't take more than an hour or a couple of hours a week at max for something like this. But again, depending on your personal needs,
Hmm.
definitely set that agreement up front.
Yeah. Yep. And I guess that highlights that there's just some unique advantages to each. Whereas, like, an advisor might be more focused on your specific company, a mentor might be there for more general advice and help as you need it. Cool. So, the next question I have is, I think, a pretty popular one. So, all the panelists have something to add here. What are some key qualities or attributes you look for in a mentor or an advisor? And how would you weigh enthusiasm about your company or just helping you versus their experience level? So, Laura, why don't you start?
There's so much to talk about here, and I think some common wisdom is to look for complementary expertise and skill sets. But some uncommon wisdom I would offer is to also ensure you have someone who does appear to have overlapping expertise and skill sets, because part of the goal is to buffer for blind spots. And inherently, we don't know where our blind spots are. So, at Forge, we've seen this play out over hundreds of companies, for example, where you have a highly technical founder who's focusing on buffering expertise around them in team building and fundraising. But for example, they may have advanced degrees in mechanical engineering, but need technical expertise from the aviation field, for example. So just don't over assume what expertise you already have in yourself, and intentionally do some overlapping to buffer for blind spots. And then I really want to emphasize the importance of chemistry. I say often that this is not unlike selecting a doctor or a romantic partner. A lot of it comes down to how well you interact with each other, and specifically the ability for them to deliver guidance or input in a way that you are able to take it in, and the ability for you to disagree in a productive way. So I really caution folks to look out for that human tendency to want to surround yourself by people who agree with you, because it feels great. But what I've experienced personally as I've built mentor programs, been a mentor, had mentorship, is that leaning into those conversations where you're disagreeing with someone is where a lot of the learning can happen, and where you can pressure test your ability to communicate productively. And this is actually how I have found some of my best mentors and advisors, is by leaning in with curiosity to our disagreements, seeing how we can communicate through it, and then realizing this person offers perspective I need and don't have innately.
Yep. Thank you, Laura. Yeah, thank you for your insights. That makes a lot of sense. Kat, is there anything you wanted to add?
The only thing that I'll add is in every film, or in the hero's journey, there's like an actual character called mentor character.
Yeah.
And they're usually the ones that have gone through your journey before and can guide you through your journey and help you kind of learn to fish rather than give you the fish, if that makes sense. So as Laura was saying, like, you don't really know what you're about to go through, right? You don't know what you don't know, if that makes sense. So these are the people that kind of can point out things like that. And then the other thing is, hopefully from key quality perspective, these mentors can really add energy to you. So this is something that I learned from my mentor, Bill Warner, who's kind of changed the film industry. And he's very optimistic, passionate, and has like a real learning mindset. And he's just excited about the same, problem that I am excited about. So
Right.
So he's the one that adds energy to me, and hopefully the people that you're working with can add energy to you as well.
Yeah, and I think I found that even in engineering and now working on a startup, just having someone that's willing to offer their time to give you their advice shows that they believe in you and you approach the whole thing with like a whole level of enthusiasm. So I agree. Anuj, was there anything that you wanted to add for qualities or attributes you would look for?
Yeah, so giant +1 to people that inspire you as well. I think that's a
Hmm.
big deal to look for. Something that I found it is almost assumed, right? That you would assume these are people of integrity, right? But you really want to, just like you would, hiring somebody to take care of a child or hiring somebody for your company, like you want to do a little bit of a background check, because sometimes people are just so excited and enthusiasm and all of that is great, right? But you know, it's just a good practice to have a list of attributes, like make a list of those for yourself, right? And then walk through that
Right.
list and say, okay, do they meet all these criteria? Sometimes I can suss these things out in a conversation. Some things I might need to learn from other places as well. So don't, especially
Right.
given this is going to be a bit of a longer term relationship potentially with you, you want to make sure that you're aligning with the right kind of person that aligns with your kind of values uh,
Right.
as well. And a practice I've like recently, I think, just started on is something that I've put in place at companies and have been part of companies that have incorporated the ideas from this book called The Five Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni, which if you've not read, please go read it today, because uh, it's all about the dynamics of working with people, and sometimes people have very different work styles, and so you want to understand and be able to overcome some of those differences through very active actively understanding how do you establish trust with this person. Are they also going to be the kind of people that will be able to do that with me? Will I be able to have the kind of productive conflict I need to with these kinds of people, so
Hmm.
that you can have that extended learning that you want to come out of these kinds of relationships, right? So again,
Right.
list these as attributes you want from the person
Hmm.
that you're looking for, and I think you use that as your guide.
Yeah, and Anuj, I think this is a good segue into one of my other questions, which is there any specific red flags or warning signs you should watch out for when you're selecting someone or exploring how you work with them?
Oh, yes. So I think the two sort of biggest ones that you will hit is people who seem like very overly focused on monetary compensation,
Hmm.
or who will push to have some very significant control, over your decisions. Right. I think you'll hit these very quickly, right? So, but as you're evaluating people, also, I think if there's some lack of clarity on their past successes, or when you talk to them, they've got some very vague, superficial advice, right? I
Yeah.
think those are things that should tell you upfront this is not going to work out. Mhm.
Yeah, makes sense. So now that we know kind of the qualities to look for and what to watch out for, my next question is, where do you find this network of people to depend on? And how do you start the conversation on mentorship and advising? Kat, do you want to take the lead?
Yeah, I actually wanted to use kind of the idea around dating. Like even finding investors is like dating, right? And
Hmm.
ultimately, it's like I hate using this term, but all like a numbers game.
Yeah.
So in order to increase your chances of meeting people who are kind of on the same page, you just want to be out there, networking or mingling with people and talking about sharing your passions and whatever venture that you're working on constantly. So
Right.
you might run into anyone that could potentially be a mentor at, you know, industry events, startup events that allow meeting new people. So accelerators, even your school's entrepreneurship center, for example, like MIT really helped me get into this world. Without it, I would not have been here today. So, more specific strategic people, warm intros are obviously the best, because ultimately relationship is based on trust, and people trust people that they trust.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is kind of like cold outreaches work sometimes too. With a kind of an approach of like, I love what you did here. I'm working on something similar. Would love your advice, or I have a specific question, and not with right away with a request of, can you be my mentor? Like, it just doesn't make sense when we start out with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So you covered a lot of good places to look there. Was there anywhere else the other panelists want to add that they've turned to?
I'll just share a funny anecdote, which is that two of the folks I would identify as my closest mentors are people who did not hire me for jobs in the past.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so mentors can come from very unlikely places. Folks that I looked up to, respected what they were doing, applied for a job, established great rapport, and that just wasn't the right opportunity to work together. But by staying in touch with folks who you do see value in, you can find different ways to engage. So, you know, that no, we're not going to hire you for this job can turn into, yes, let's meet periodically so I can support you in your career. So always look for those opportunities.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, that's interesting. Not something I was expecting, but very cool. Anuj, anything you wanted to add?
Yes. So don't ignore the power of online communities. The very reason I am sitting here is because I participated in an online community, again, as somebody who had no background in the thing that I currently have a career in, and met the kind of people who gave me jobs, and, you know, who I could then, you know, find that were ahead of the journey, you know, than me, to help me out. So definitely try that. I'll give you a couple of examples as well that people here can take advantage of. First Round Capital, which is based in the West Coast, has a great mentorship program called First Round Fast Track. You can sign up to be a mentor or a mentee. Mentors become mentees and vice versa in that program. They run multiple cohorts. Great place to meet you know, potential people who can you know, take you forward. They do an awesome job of matching you. I will, of course, you know, call out Startup Boston as well. They have mentor mixers as well, so definitely take advantage of that. There are even other local organizations. I mean, somebody mentioned accelerators and the like, but Mass Challenge has opportunities for mentorship here. You can join the Boston Entrepreneurs Network. And again, you know, I think, Kat, maybe you mentioned MIT, but both like MIT, Harvard, they host so many startup events, speaker series, workshops. I think people tend to discount schools as a place to go find people like this, but definitely go to those sorts of places. Even
Yeah.
meetup.com will have a lot of startup events. So, you know, just you start small, start local, you know, go to a local university, go to like a relevant org, meet up. Again, like I said, Startup
Right.
Boston, First Round Fast Track. And sometimes, you know, there'll be paid communities as well. And this is not me shilling any of them, but just as a recent example, I had, there's a paid community called Friends of Lenny that they last year started out just as a demand from the community to have a more official mentorship program. So there may be other communities like this where they've just seen the need emerge and make these programs more official. There may be communities you're part of where it's not official, but go talk to the people that run these communities to start mentorship programs.
Right.
As
Right.
well. Just because it doesn't exist, you know, but it only doesn't exist because nobody said it, even though everybody's feeling it. So
Yeah.
opportunities are everywhere if you just want to lean.
Yeah, it sounds like as long as you're dedicating the time to growing your network, you're maximizing your chances of finding a good mentor, advisor, co-founder, investors, and so on. So kind of goes back to what Kat was saying regarding it's kind of a numbers game. So okay, so I have a couple more predefined questions left, but before I ask those, I just want to let the audience know that we are going to leave plenty of time for audience questions at the end. So if you have them, please put them in the Q&A window so that some of your questions can actually be asked. Okay.
Aileen, I apologize. I think buried in the last question might have also been the question about how to start the conversation, not just where
Right. Yes. Thank
how
you.
to start it. And I would love to share that I really personally struggled with this when I was younger. And now that I'm in the other side of the conversation and folks are asking me to be a mentor and an advisor, I wish I had realized when I was younger how much people love to be helpful and to offer their expertise. I'm always so excited when people ask, can I get your advice on this thing? And back to what we were talking about earlier, that's often a best way to start an early conversation is not, hey, we just met and I see you have this experience. Let's talk about mentorship, but let's grab coffee sometime. I'd love to learn more about your background. If you're open, I'd love to ask you some questions and start small like that. And I'll share a personal opinion that is probably going to make some people cringe because it's very common. I don't love it when people start with, can I pick your brain? I don't turn those requests down because that's just a social nicety, but it really implies sort of a transactional one-way interaction. And I'm a big believer in starting with thinking about how can you add value in both directions? How can you have an interesting conversation? And so, if you've said, can I pick your brain? Don't kick yourself, but maybe consider, I'm really impressed by your background in X, Y, and Z. I'd love to talk to you more. And if you're open to it, get your input on a few questions. That feels so much more human than, can I pick your brain?
Thanks, Laura. Yeah. I think that maybe sometimes we do underestimate how much mentors and advisors love to help. And just keeping the conversation kind of like two-sided makes sense.
So can I just double click on that for a second, right? And I'm not sure about Laura and Kat, but and it does not come across here, but I'm an introvert completely. When I go to events, it's hard for me to talk to people. Like, even as a speaker, I don't go talk to other speakers sometimes. Like, right? And so, I've got to come up with different ways to start these conversations as well. So, which is why I think for me, starting online is actually a good way to do this, because I have control over when and how and what I want to say. If I want, I can chat GPT what I want to say before I right. So this is why online communities work. Even LinkedIn works, right? And to extend what Laura was talking about, even if you can start the conversation with, hey, I just love what you post, right, on LinkedIn. That just start there, right? Because the other person's going to feel great because nobody sends people messages like that. Right. And that's a good way to whether it's sending starting in the public forum with commenting on whatever they wrote, and then moving into the DMs, right? That's a great way to sort of naturally progress into something that becomes more meaningful, that goes from online to offline, as well. And you can use a similar strategy with, if you're going to attend like a mix or an event. And I think this is always a good idea when people say, you're attending an event, spread the word about the event. I know it feels marketing-y to do that. Like, why would I do that for somebody else? But really what you're doing is putting up the flag that, hey, I'm going to be here. Is anybody else also going to be here? And maybe somebody will respond, or even if they don't, somebody else throws up a flag that they're going to be there. Allows you to initiate that, hey, I'm also going to be there. Can we meet before we chat? Because going to these events, alone, especially as an introvert, you go in and then you stand in the corner and you're like, okay, I don't know what to do here. This is sort of thing. So, but maybe kind of building up a 1-2 person posse beforehand to go in with, sort of maybe eases that anxiety, or even go talk to the founder, the organizer of the event, about, hey, you have the attendee list. Do you know anybody who might be similar to me? Just want to make a connection before the event, right? It'll just
Yeah.
ease your path in and, make you a little bit more confident about then approaching the next person and the next person.
Yeah, and it's refreshing to hear that, there's others in this space that are introverts kind of like disguised as extroverts when we go to these events. But yeah, thanks, Anuj. And regarding, posting on LinkedIn and social media and marketing events, like I never thought of it that way, that you actually have something to gain from that as well, letting others know that you're going to be there and you're engaged. So thank you. Okay, so let's see, we have, some more time left. So I guess switching gears a little bit, how do you handle disagreements or conflicts that might arise with mentors or advisors? And how do you maintain your decision-making power? Kat, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah, I think Laura was covered it a bit earlier in another question, but ultimately, the good mentor relationship does happen with disagreements. I mean, you'll hear like oftentimes you'll hear 10 different things from 10 different people, right? Ultimately, but you're the one that decides on that advice, because your situation is unique, your company is unique, and we're living in a different time as maybe, those mentors who might have created the same company, 20 years, 10 years ago. So they are hopefully invested in you and your journey. So they will, likely enjoy that disagreement as well. And they're curious. They're almost like they're learning through you as well, so they're excited about kind of learning about you trying different things and then coming back to them and saying whatever you gave advice on didn't work, and therefore we went with this approach. So as long as you're able to try, fail, and then be able to have some sort of logical reasoning or database, data-driven reasoning behind why you didn't take their advice, I mean, hopefully the mentors will stick around.
Yeah, makes sense. Laura, was there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think this loops back to a couple of earlier points you were making. One about having some exploratory conversations before you enter into a long-term relationship to test for how you handle disagreement and if it works for you. But I think a thing to underscore is that people don't disagree if they don't care. So this is part of why I like to lean into disagreement. Someone is demonstrating that they're passionate or knowledgeable, and that there's something that you can learn from them in all likelihood because of that. So don't take it immediately as a bad sign if you disagree. I take it as a good sign. We both care. And then importantly, of course, you're not going to do everything a single mentor or advisor advises. But it's really important to the point made earlier to be upfront about the fact that you're not going to follow their advice, why you're not going to follow their advice, that there's logic behind it, and then keep them up to date on the outcomes so you can both learn from it together. And I think, most mentors and advisors, we really appreciate that communication and that follow-up. And that's more important than agreeing on every course of action.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you both for sharing. So this one is a little bit more of a, I guess, specific question to your experiences with your startups, but can you share a memory or an experience where mentorship played a crucial role in your journey, where the advice that you received really led to a positive outcome that you might not have had otherwise? So I see Laura nodding, so I'll start with you.
So this is a little repetitive, but actually that advice about not shying away from like challenging, difficult, unpleasant disagreements. Sorry, I think my Wi-Fi is freezing a little bit. Hopefully folks can still hear me.
Oh, that's okay. We can still hear you.
Good. The advice to see that as a powerful signal of an opportunity to learn and to engage, I think was really transformative in my career. I think it's really easy, especially when you're walking a tough road, like starting a business or growing an organization. to sometimes just fall into the trap of avoiding what doesn't feel good. And I think taking these disagreements is a really powerful signal that someone cares and that they have an alternate perspective and that you can learn from each other.
Right.
For me, that's really helped me unlock whole new levels of understanding and traction in my own career. And I've seen other startups really lean into that as well and surround themselves with folks who can challenge them in productive ways and come out stronger for it.
Kat, is there an experience that stands out from, your startup experiences?
Yeah, I mean, this current one, at first I started working with Bill, as I mentioned earlier, Bill Warner, on specifically a costume design project, and that kind of became like a brand idea, which I'm still exploring. And I kept going back to him saying, I want the brand to be about the science fiction movie connected to the brand. And he kept trying to dissuade me from connecting two projects together. And then and I kept going back, to him, because I can't, once an idea's time has come, it has to come out. So I can't stop thinking about it. And he's ultimately really helped me figure out the story around this science fiction movie, despite dissuading me originally for it. So through that, honestly, I think it was like a very healing journey. I had to heal myself and really look into myself to come up with this story. I was kind of running away from avoiding pain, I guess, in my personal story that I had to look into to really be able to tell a powerful story in this movie. So now it is a movie that's going to happen, but we're still trying to figure out next steps on that.
Very cool. Anuj, maybe you can take this one from the perspective of the mentor. So
I think the biggest question I ask anybody, who I work with in any capacity, right, is that, the thing that will move everything forward is your rate of learning. Right. That is really the only growth hack there is. So for anybody who's been searching for silver bullets so far, I'm sorry to disappoint you. This is the only growth hack, is how fast you learn. Right. And so the question I leave people with is sort of, if you come in every Monday, like, can you and your team, answer very objectively yes to, are we smarter this week than we were last week? Right. Because otherwise, likelihood that your startup is going to die is very high. It's always, you can tell when people take that seriously, right? And go and, dip into creating very, even if they're janky hypotheses for things to go try out, right? And I have always said that, and somebody said this as well, like, I think you learn as much as a mentor as you do as a mentee, right? Because when people go take what you've given them and then apply it in their own context and come back with it, you're like, I would have never thought about doing it that way, sort of thing. And I'm constantly hit with that, all the time. And it's probably the biggest reason, right? It's almost like a half selfish reason for me to go do it, because, it expands my brain in terms of how I would think about doing something, because I have a very specific viewpoint on the world, like everybody does, right? And so, if not for any other reason, right, I think it's totally expanded my palette, and my repertoire of how to deal with different situations, right? And if I sort of draw the line back, even to when I first needed sort of mentorship, right? And when I first stepped into startup land, because I had no experience with startups when I first got this career. I'd spent 13 years at a big medical device company, right? Used to big hierarchies, moving slowly, all of the usual stuff, right? And I will never forget being told that, you sit and overanalyze too much, right? Just go do the damn thing, right? And the worst that's going to happen is you will make a mistake, and you will learn from that mistake and you'll never do it again.
Right, right.
Right. And so, the next obvious question, of course, become, okay, so now how do I do this thing on my own without overanalyzing, right? And so,
Mhm.
right. And so I bring it back. So this is how it helps me, is when I'm asking people to act quickly, right, and learn fast, like how do they get over the hump of overanalyzing? Because that helps me, come up with new ways of how to not do that myself.
Right, right.
So
And
because
not being afraid of failure, just going for it.
totally, right.
Yeah,
So I've had it from
yeah,
both ends where, yeah, I think I've almost found that this is my common thread, is because I was so deep in this over analyzing bucket, and as somebody who needed help getting out of it, and had
right.
somebody beat me over the head with it, that's almost become the connective tissue for, how I benefit even as a mentor, we're seeing people get out of that,
Yes, yes.
and different ways they approach things.
Yeah, as an engineer by training, I can relate to that overanalyzing a lot as well. And it sounds like kind of going back to the question on what to do if you disagree with your mentor or advisor. If you're willing to try things and iterate quickly, maybe you can try both what you're hypothesizing and what they're hypothesizing. So yes, thank you, Anuj. That there was a lot of good insights there. So let's see. We have about 20 minutes left. So I think at this point, it makes sense to switch to some of the audience questions. And there's one that really stands out to me because it's one that I wondered about myself. And I guess this is more specific to advising. But it says, how do you phrase your compensation ask of equity when speaking to founders? And also, alternatively, how, as a founder, how do you approach that conversation?
Yeah, so I will just go back to the thing I mentioned right at the top, right? That Founder Institute agreement template, I think, has helped clarify so many things, because even as founders, it's unsurprisingly, founders are, but oh, I don't want to give up too much equity for whatever, right? Especially to an advisor, and that's fine, right? So I think it's more about connecting. What does this level of involvement mean for you? Right? What will it mean for me in terms of my time commitment as well? Right? And I think once people get a sense of, okay, what's standard in the industry, right? And when I compare that with, what I will get out of you as a mentor, right? That helps
Mhm.
people get over the hump of, okay, X equity or 0.25% or 0.5% or whatever it is, feels very normal, right? And again, nothing is ever set in stone, right? Because if you as a mentee are feeling like you're not getting what you agreed on, like, you can revise that at any time, right? So I would just lean on best practices. Google is your friend.
Right, right.
People have been doing this for eons, right? So
Mhm.
in my books, this is not really something you should be spending inordinate amounts of time fussing over. Take a general practice that works and actually get to the task of, what do you want to get to do.
Right. And I'm assuming that equity is typically vested as well, the same way it would be for like co-founders, right?
Totally.
So in the course of like your or the life of your startup, I guess earlier on, have you found that the advisors and mentors and also their involvement level kind of changes over time based on your needs? And how do you kind of like translate that to your initial predictions, if that makes sense?
So,
Um,
so yes, I think it almost inevitably will change, at least in terms of the quality. May not be in the quantity, but in what,
Hmm.
right? Because startups will evolve. Like, if you're a idea stage startup, you'll, evolve into having a prototype or a beta, and so the kinds of things that matter then are very different from what would matter. Oh, now I'm at product market fit, and now I need to grow. And so I think that will change uh, pretty dramatically based on where you're at.
Right.
So I think, which is why, I think when we talk so far, I know we've been talking about mentors and advisors as, each of us, but I think it's always useful to have, you know, a group of mentors and advisors,
Mhm.
and constantly evolve who comes in and out as well, right? So especially if you've gone and picked advisors who have, let's say, very specific advice on, you know, how do you validate your idea versus how do you grow a startup, right? The kind of help you may need from them may naturally have an end, right? So I think
Yes.
evaluate that as well as part of your agreement, as well. And there'll be some who may be more evergreen in terms of, they have such deep domain expertise that, no matter getting from 0 to 1 and from 1 to 10, like they will naturally have a longer lifespan with
Yeah.
you as well. But I think don't be afraid of constantly, evaluating who you've got as an advisor and mentor, and optimizing that pool for what your needs are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I guess,
And
like,
this is, yeah.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Kat. Yeah.
Just to add to that, Anuj, I don't know if I've never looked at the Founder Institute template before, but usually at the earlier stages, it depends on the number of hours per quarter or whatever that they have,
Yes.
availability or can really kind of help. And then that's when the equity kind of is tied to, right? So I think I'd like different, maybe that's like over a year period. And then, sometimes you don't really, some quarters you don't meet, but some quarters where you are, actively fundraising or actively looking for customer traction, new customers and things like that, then they kind of pull all of those hours into that one quarter or something like that. And then let's say you're in the early stage, hopefully they've helped enough where, the equity makes sense, where later stage you don't have to and still keep the equity. Does that make sense? The equity wouldn't go
Yes,
if
it does.
they're part of now they own part of your company already, right?
Right.
Unless
sounds like a template is the way to go. Yeah, these things have been considered before, so that would help. Yeah, for sure.
I'd love to share a story about how not to phrase the equity ask. So there's a startup that I informally mentor who's in very early pre-seed fundraising stages and was looking for money, not advice. But the old adage, when you're looking for advice, ask for money. And when you're looking for money, ask for advice. She was looking for money. She got advice and someone proactively saying, I will give you, more investment than you're asking for, but I want sizable chunk of equity. And she came to me and said, what should I do with this? And I said, do you know this person well enough to want to marry them and run this business with them? And if not, why are they asking you for such a big cut? It was premature. And that's a really good signal that, they're not looking for fit. They're looking for financial upside. And so, luckily she did not pursue that. But as a mentor who believes in the coaching philosophy, I didn't say, do it, don't do it. I asked her some questions about, is this someone you want to be in business with in perpetuity?
Yeah, and that just kind of points to the kinds of invaluable decisions that mentors can help less experienced founders make. So thank you for sharing that. All right, so we have a couple more questions from the audience. I think this one has kind of been discussed, but maybe we can make this kind of like a short wrap up or key takeaways from the whole discussion. So someone asks, I imagine different mentors will be good at different things. Early on in your startup journey, how would you describe what the right type of mentor would be? A founder in your space, an investor, someone with a strong background in sales versus product, or vice versa? So to me, it sounds like you'll need a combination of mentors, but is there anything that the panel would like to add?
Yeah, so from my perspective, let's say you're just starting out, I think you'd rather go with a mentor because you don't know anything at this point, right? And you just want to get started. And I think the advisors come in with more targeted sort of business expertise, right? And I think for me, it makes sense when there's a there to go get an advisor to move that business thing forward. But until then, there's as much, I don't want to use the word growth for early stage things, but there's as much you learning how to do a startup as it is you learning about yourself, about how do I do this new thing I've never done before, right? So there's as much professional or personal growth that's going to come with trying to figure out this startup-y thing as well, right? So if I had to sequence it, I would pick, no, maybe not even one. I'd pick maybe 2 or 3 different mentors who have seen this early path, maybe even in this vertical that I'm interested in. Start off there. And because I've always found that, maybe one accountability buddy is good, but being shamed by 2 or 3 people, like for not moving, works for me really, really well. Right? I disappoint all of these people. Right. And once I've made enough progress, and think, okay, I'm going to commit even more time, or I'm at this point where I need very specific guidance, I would start to bring an advisor on board at that point.
One thing not mentioned in that question, I think, but that I think is really important if you intend to grow your company, which I assume you probably do, is someone who has experience that is somewhat comparable scaling. Because the challenges at the early stage are different than the challenges at the middle stage, are different than the challenges at the commercial stage.
Mhm.
So someone who's been through that journey ahead of you and can help you get ahead of certain pitfalls can be really valuable.
Yes, thank you, Laura. Kat, was there anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just adding on to Anuja's point, I think, honestly, I think you can have like 10 or more, as many mentors as possible. I have no idea
The
what
more
you
the better.
Yeah, and when I think about mentors, I usually think about it as like, can this person provide strategic advice, technical advice, and then like cheerleading? So all of them are probably cheerleaders, hopefully, but you definitely need someone who can provide strategic guidance. So maybe they're more bigger picture, long-term vision type of help. They've done multiple companies in the past, hopefully in your industry, and can really help you from a strategic perspective. And then on the the day-to-day, like actual like hiring, firing, marketing, any of those little more tactical stuff, you should also have people almost per area that are deep into that specific type of work. I think it helps to have as many people that you can just call and say, like, this is specifically what I'm struggling with today. How do I approach this?
Yeah. Thank you, Kat.
Yeah. Can I just add one more thing on that? Because the benefit of having more mentors is you also have more networks to tap into.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, which is not to say that you should now go get 10 mentors. Be strategic about who you get.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But know that is a benefit that most people don't take advantage of, that when they have multiple mentors.
Yes. Yes. Steph, I see you're back. So I think that signals that we're kind of running out of time.
If you have final thoughts, that is okay. I heard, I was like, it sounds like they might be close to wrapping up and doing final thoughts, and